Namaskar. Welcome to another edition of Vimash podcast. In the series that we are continuing on Christianism, we have our part four, which is going to be delivered by Dr. Bijeet Prasantha today. Namaste, Bijidda.
Namaste.
Namaste. And to audience, thank you for joining. I think we have few minutes. We can take a minute to actually discuss what we're going to talk today, and then we will start and we'll get audience to come and join us for a minute or two. And then Bijidda, so
Sure,
today
sure.
is the number four in the series of the podcast, the series that we are doing.
Right.
So today, what we are going to talk about?
So today is the our fourth lecture or the fourth talk of the entire series, and today we are going to talk about destructions and genocides committed in the ancient Europe and in the Roman Empire um, by Christianity. Today we are not going to talk about all these colonialism and other form of destructions. For example, destructions of Latin America or North America or India or all these places, Australia, for example. All these places, we are not going to talk about destructions like the at the global level, but today specifically we are going to focus on the destruction of the Roman Empire and the destruction of temples, genocides in that era when Christianism was spreading. Because again, we need to understand that era primarily because it is of our should be of our interest as Indian to understand how Christianism spread in a given part of a country and how it actually subverts and then destroys the whole of culture, universities, temples, which sense of spirituality and everything. That's why focusing on this specific part of ancient Roman Empire is going to help us. Uh, Definitely, we are going to talk about this colonialism and slavery, all those things that Christianism has gifted humanity with, but that will be topic of another day. I think it will be our eighth or ninth lecture. Let me check. So, colonialism and slavery will be the seventh lecture. So there we are going to talk about the global, like the genocide at global level, done by Christianism.
Okay, so I think that set the stage for us. So, audience, because we are doing this lecture and we want more people to hear it, so we will request everybody to share our channel, share our content, subscribe to our channel, so that we can get more guests to come and talk to us, and we can get more time devoted to these kinds of academic endeavors. So, request everybody, please share, subscribe our content if you like it, so that more people can get benefits of what we are doing. So all that said, Vijitda, over to you. I will come in between in case some comments that we need to react to. So over to you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Bhupenda, for the platform. And yes, so as I said already, this is the fourth lecture, and the topic is destructions and genocides by Christianism, the cult name Christianism. uh, and so you know that so in my first and the only book that I have written so far, which is History of Indonesia and Hindu Genocides, there I have actually given an extensive and exhaustive account of the extent of Hindu genocides committed by and perpetrated by Islam in the Indian subcontinent, right? So that part is covered. Now, as a topic of my interest as well, I am planning to cover the genocides done by Christians. Um, and for that matter, we have to sort of keep into the ancient Roman Empire, and specifically the time from, let's say, 70 AD till the time till 400, 500 AD, because in that crucial 500 years, Christianism, through some cunning strategies, through victimization, through superstition. It has propagated, it managed to propagate and capture the power of the Roman Empire. And once it captured the power, it started to destroy the ancient belief, gods, temples, societies, civilizations, and religions as well, right? Um, and the very word religion, right? It comes from a word religio, which is associated with, let's say, the cosmic harmony, harmony with the state order and all these things. So if you have a belief, so as per the ancient Roman philosophers, if you have a belief which actually keeps you entangled with the I mean the cosmic functioning, the biggest functioning, and which is as per the social order and moral order and order of the state, that is called religion. But superstition is something which are absurd beliefs, and which are not as per the as sanctioned by the state, and all these beliefs that actually create social and chaos, social chaos, and also chaos in the empire, those used to be called superstitio, right? So ancient Roman philosophers, they used to term or call Christianism as superstitio and not religio. Okay. They used to call the paganism, right? The Roman, you can call it paganism or Roman nature worshipping. They used to call those ideas as religio, right? So Christianism, in the process of subversion, has subverted the very word religion itself, to the extent that we call uh, Christianism and Islam as religion, right? They are not religion; they are superstition, as rightly defined by the ancient Greco-Roman philosopher. Large number. I mean, the definition was given by, I think, Cicero. Um, but yeah, a large number of philosophers, including, I think, the administrator named Pliny the Younger, whom we are going to talk about right now. He also called Christianism as superstition, not religion. Okay, so right, so as you already know, the earliest record that we get about Christianism was around 72 AD, right? 72 years, at least 72 years after Jesus was born, claimed to be born, right? We don't know. There is no contemporary historical record that talks about Jesus at his time, right? So Jesus is believed to be here on earth from 0 AD till 40 AD, but there is no contemporary historical record to substantiate this factually. Okay, so this is now I'm starting the whole story from around let's say 100 AD or so, between 80 AD and 100 AD. So there is this guy Pliny the Younger, right? So Pliny the Younger was administrator of what we call Turkey now. Okay, so from Turkey, so that part was basically part of the Eastern Roman Empire, and Pliny the Younger was administrator at that area. And the earliest account that we are getting from the Roman philosophers, uh, those are coming from people like Pliny the Younger, and he's finding Christianism. Actually, I mean, in his province, he's finding Christianism little irritating and irksome, and he's writing that Christianism is spreading in Roman villages based on rumors and superstitions, and the Roman administrators and philosophers are not happy about it. And he's writing all these things like this is a wretched cult, and it has been spreading here, and it is affecting the worship of old gods, and it is infecting not only the towns but villages and rural districts as well. So these are the words in which Pliny the Younger is describing Christianism, and he's furthermore writing that okay, the dignity of the Roman gods are being violated. Christians are spreading malice against the Roman pagan temples and the gods therein. So uh, obviously, because Christianism initially spread through superstitions, it was spreading mainly in the villages, right? Because the urban elite Roman aristocrats, they used to ridicule Christianism, but Christianism finds some place in the villages. and obviously the administrators were not very happy about it. It was not, I mean, the problem was not very much religious, okay, because Pliny, this guy, Pliny the younger, he was not religious either, okay. I mean, he knew all these things about the Roman gods, but he did not used to give much attention or much sort of, you know, he did not have much bhakti, as evident from his letters and records. So in one letter, he's writing with some lyrical enthusiasm. But obviously, Roman aristocrats, so they were big fond of literature and all those things. So he's almost lyrically writing about a shrine, okay, shrine of a local river god, some river god in line like similar to Saraswati. Okay, you have to remember in Veda, for example, Saraswati used to be a river god who later sort of elevated into the goddess of knowledge. Okay, in fact, it was one of the first examples where natural god, right, the god who was sort of epitomizing and naturalizing something physical in the nature, right, like a river, who were elevated to something in the spiritual, in the Bhav Jagat, right? So Saraswati initially was the goddess of river. Then she was abstracted into the goddess of knowledge. So that was the sort of abstraction of a goddess that Hindus did. I think during the age of Vedas as well, because the later part of Veda we can see that Saraswati herself is being elevated to the goddess of knowledge. Anyway, so this is a shrine of this river goddess in Italy, in present day Italy. And then Pliny the Younger, he's writing all these things. This is this shrine at the foot of a hill, densely wooded with ancient cypresses. A spring is gushing into a pool as clear as glass, and you can count the coins which have been thrown in, and the pebbles shining at the bottom of the shrine. The temple itself is venerable, right? Um, and though, as with many Romans, there was some limit to the veneration, and the walls of this temple were covered with inscriptions, some of which will make you laugh. So here, Pliny is actually sort of in a very mocking way, sort of trying to describe his bhakti about the shrine, right? Ki this is a shrine, and there are some inscription which will probably make you laugh. Though I know you are really too charitable to laugh at any of them. So here he's writing about some guy who is probably bhakt in the modern day term, and Pliny is saying, ki, I know you won't laugh, but it invoked some laughter in me. And then Pliny once again, being a perfect Roman, right, and being too educated to indulge in bhakti, he was again spawning, right? He was too well bred to spawn them, right? So obviously Pliny, this guy, this administrator, was not a very fervent sort of bhakt, right, in modern day term. He's not a very much a theistic guy. So obviously it is evident that I mean, Pliny was irritated with Christians, um, not and this irritation was not coming from his religious belief. It was coming because it was actually Christianism was creating chaos in the Roman Empire overall. So yeah, so he's upset because the citizens of his province are becoming disgruntled by the Christians' behavior. So all these things are happening. These Christians are have started to sort of distribute pamphlets, doing blasphemy of the classical Roman gods. They were creating riot-like situations. Okay, they were impacting the regular sort of order of the Roman society. That's why it irritated people like Pliny, right? And then obviously there was a Roman law which used to say it is proper for every good and worthy governor to take care that the province over which he presides is peaceable and quiet. So this was one of the laws. You have to maintain the quiet and the peace in the whatever place you are governing. Okay, so discontented local had to be taken seriously. If they were not listened to, a situation might develop where riots could break out, for which Pliny would be held responsible. So Pliny was did not want कि कुछ riot हो जाए, दंगा वंगा लग जाए. So Pliny was actually being irritated because of the fact the Christian people were actually being too much radical, and they were hampering the canonical way of life of Greco-Roman life. Okay, and probably Pliny was the first official who was reluctantly sort of pressed into this in this unexpected situation. But obviously, he was. I mean, this riot-like situation would continue for 600, 700 years. So definitely, Pliny was not the last administrator, right? And also it is evident from those letters that even the Greco-Roman locals, they were not complaining about the religiosity of the Christianism, but something as trivial as butchery. So for example, जैसे अभी इंडिया में झगड़ा चलता है, राइट, कि हलाल वाला एक इकोनॉमी इंडिया में चालू हो गया है. तो वहां पे क्या हुआ था, सो ऑल दोस बुचर शॉप, उनका सेल कम होने लगा था बिकॉज बेसिकली द मीट दैट ग्रेको रोमन यूज टू कंज्यूम वो सैक्रिफिशियल मीट. मतलब वो मांस तब खाते थे जो मांस एक्चुअली भगवान को अर्पित होता था. म- कुछ तो बलि प्रथा टाइप था. तो बिकॉज दे यूज टू ईट द सैक्रिफिशियल मीट ओनली, and Christians were not believing in the sacrifice to pagan gods. तो इसलिए लोकल ट्रेडमैन का जो उनका जो बिजनेस था, that were also being affected, and the local people, specifically like these businessmen, they were angry because of the surge of Christian sentiment कि sacrificial meat हम लोग नहीं खाएंगे, हम लोग अपना sort of meat shop वगैरह खोलेंगे. एंड ऑब्वियसली बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द प्रॉफिट वाज सफरिंग, राइट. तो ये जो हलाल और झटका वाला जो झगड़ा है, ये एक्चुअली उस टाइम मतलब ग्रेको रोमन सोसाइटी में भी चल रहा था. एंड देन राइट देन आफ्टर सम टाइम, obviously, if we go through the historical record as written by the Christian historians, we will see that they are accusing the Roman governors of declaring something like Christians were all to be hunted out and killed, right? But if you go to the primary historical record, जैसे अभी होता है कि if you go to the historical, I mean the history books of Rumila Thapar or Irfan Habib, you'll see that they are actually disparaging and ridiculing Hinduism, and they are trying to portray the Ashrafi jihad on the soil of India, those were actually liberating force, right? But if you go to the primary historical record of Al Biruni or Al Udbi, Firista, you will see how brutal those Islamic campaigns were, and they were driven by some radical fundamentalist jihadi mindset. So similarly, the Christian historians over last whatever two millennia, they have distorted the narrative of the ancient Greco-Roman history. So obviously they sort of blame the Roman governors of being too brutal on the Christians, but this is not actually true, because if we try to check the primary historical record, we will again, many of the historical records are actually burned and destroyed by the Christians. But we get these records either through some Christian reference. I mean, some Christian books where they are referring to these comments of the ancient Greco-Roman philosophers, or through some direct copies that were saved by various monks and various knowledge traditions. Okay, and from there it is very clear that far from persecuting the Christians, Roman officials actively supported some of the prominent Christians. राइट. अभी जैसे इंडिया में होता है, इंडिया में सेकुलरिज्म है, तो जो मुस्लिम उलेमा हो गया या फिर इधर का कोई लोकल पादरी वादरी हो गया, उनको तो मतलब बीजेपी का भी लोकल जो अभी भी जो गवर्नमेंट है, के जैसे केरल हो गया या वहाँ का स्टेट गवर्नमेंट हो गया, इवन सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट हो गया, उनका पेट्रोनेज तो मिलता है कुछ हद तक, राइट? इंडिया में आर्टिकल 25 to 30 है, विच सिक्योर द माइनॉरिटी राइट। अभी भी मिशनरी लोग अपने स्कूल चलाते हैं वगैरह वगैरह। बट अगर क्रिश्चियनिज्म इंडिया पे आ गया, छा गया, then they are not going to acknowledge these facts, right? Christian history will actually eradicate this part of Hindu history, and they are going to say कि Hindus 2025 में क्रिश्चियन और मुस्लिम के ऊपर काफी जुल्म कर रहा था। they are going to interpret the history obviously this way, right? So ऐसा ही हुआ है। But if you go to the primary records, you will see कि the Roman officials were actively supporting some of the prominent Christians. And for example, none other than Saint Paul, who was preaching very vigorously in Roman Empire at that time, and this guy was clearly on good terms with officials in his province, okay? And they even intervened to try to protect him from an angry mob, the mob who got incited by Christian provocations against the Roman way of life and spirituality. सो सेंट पॉल इधर प्रोवो कर रहा है, और एक्चुअली रोमन जो अपना स्टेट है वो उसको प्रोटेक्शन दे रहा है। आपको ये झलक दिखेगा अभी जो हमारा सेकुलर इंडिया है उसके साथ थोड़ा सिमिलरिटी दिखेगा, राइट? सो या, सो ऑब्वियसली दिस first few recorded history of encounter between Christians and pagans in the Roman Empire, those were not a religious conflict. Those were conflict of law and order, right? And in fact, all over the empire, the Romans were frustratingly unwilling to play their role as bloodthirsty martyr makers. So, मतलब one thing that everyone agrees with the Christian historian कि जो क्रिश्चियन उस टाइम पे, लेट्स से, कॉमन मास था, द लैम्स, राइट? द लैम्स ऑफ जीसस, those uneducated, sort of downtrodden people of the society. One thing was visible कि they had this weird love for martyrdom, ठीक है? और ये एक्चुअली रोमन उस टाइम का जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर होता था, इट यूज टू बग देम कि हम लोग इनको समझाने जा रहे हैं, बट दे आर रेडी टू डाई एंड दे हेट अस। नाउ if there is a community within your country which hate you and your state and your system, how to deal with them? Even like this Roman noble aristocratic state, they could not find a way of dealing with this weird form of hate कि जहाँ पे स्टेट को और स्टेट के जो एक्टर्स हैं उनको इविल समझा जा रहा है, उनको शैतान समझा जा रहा है, right? No matter what they do, they were pagans. Hence, they in the eyes of a Christian, they deserved hatred and they deserved to be spat on. और ये करते थे, ये जो लोकल क्रिश्चियंस होते थे, दे यूज टू डू ऑल दिस थिंग्स, ठीक है? सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल, देयर वाज दिस गाय एरियस एंटोनियस, ही वाज अ रोमन गवर्नर ऑफ द एशिया माइनर, दिस साइड, who in the late 2nd century had executed a number of Christians in his province, and he was probably unprepared for what came next. Instead of fleeing, local Christians suddenly turned up in large mob, presented themselves before him. Antonius did indeed dutifully kill a few. Presumably, there were only so much temptation a Roman can stand. But rather than dispatching the rest with pleasure, he turned to them with what, even with the passage of almost 2 millennia, sounds unmistakably like exasperation. Quote, "Oh, you ghastly people, if you want to die, you have cliffs you can jump off and nooses to hang yourself with." कि यहाँ मेरे साथ, मेरे पास क्यों मरने आ रहे हो, राइट? कहीं से कूद के मर जाओ, या फिर वही कि रस्सी बस्सी लेके खुद को हैंग कर लो। व्हाई आर कमिंग टू मी? एंड द रीजन वाज बिकॉज कि उनको समझाया गया था, उस टाइम के जो क्रिश्चियन मॉब था, दे वर एक्सप्लेन्ड कि if they die in the hand of these evil, right? Just like Jesus died on the cross, these Romans are also going to get some heaven. Like Jesus got into some heaven, these guys, through their martyrdom, will also get to enjoy a very nice afterlife. Okay, and because of this weird sort of belief, which was very much alien to the Roman Empire and the administrators, Other Christians were so eager to die that when they spontaneously turned up in front of officials, they did so readily chained, much to the interest of the bemused locals. और जो लोकल जो पेगन लोग होते थे वो तो मजे ले रहे थे कि यार कितने स्टूपिड लोग हैं, मतलब खुद जाके शहादत दे रहे हैं, right? And in 311 AD, Saint Anthony, hearing that a persecution was in full swing in nearby Alexandria, hurried from his desert dwelling to the city. There he went out dressed in white to catch the judge's attention as he walked past. For Antony was burning with a desire for martyrdom. So Antony was actually trying to poke a judge of the Roman Empire uh, so that he can give him martyrdom. Now the judge did not care, right? And he just passed by. And the Saint Antony was very much disappointed by this. And Antony returned home and he was saddened by the fact that despite his wish to suffer for the name of God, martyrdom was not granted him, was not granted to him. And once back in his cell, Antony consoled himself for his continuing existence by adding a hair shirt to his daily attire and never washing again. So basically, Antony, जज ने क्योंकि वही डेथ सेंटेंस नहीं दिया, एंटनी बिकम वेरी सैड और फिर इसने भाव ले लिया कि मैं आगे से कभी नहाऊंगा नहीं. ठीक है. So this was the weirdness of Christian belief at that time. Now, other Christians who were deprived of execution turned instead to suicide. In the 4th century North Africa, locals watched in horror as faithfully and deranged men, because they loved the name martyr and because they desired human praise more than divine charity, they killed themselves. The method of suicide varies, and the methods of suicide varied, but drowning, setting oneself on fire, and jumping off cliffs were among the most popular. Whatever the method, the aim was always the same: martyrdom, eternal glory in heaven, and eternal fame on earth, or so it was hoped. Right? So, just imagine this is the same Christian sort of British Empire, right? The British Empire who had this Christian belief, they were mocking at our Sati Pratha. Now, obviously, Sati or the whole Jauhar Pratha, it is very unfortunate because, I mean, the ancient Ranis, queens, and their maids, they used to do it to save themselves from the necrophilia of the Islamic invaders. But here you see that these people are dying just because of some stupid superstitious faith. And the same Christianism that gave birth to this sort of stupid, inglorious death, they have been mocking our tradition, our like the sort of Veer Gatha of Indians with such passion, right? Does it make sense? No. And because I mean this is the subversion of narrative, right? कि जो जिन लोगों के इतिहास इससे भरा हुआ है वो लोग हमारे जौहर का सती प्रथा का या साका का मजाक उड़ाते हैं, right? So in the Jauhar and Saka you have the sense of bravery. In the Christian martyrdom you have sense of superstition and stupidity and nothing else. Anyway, so the group most famous for practicing this sort of martyrdom were called circumcellions. Okay, so circumcellions were this weird group. They were actually near the bottom of an extremely hierarchical empire, and their lives were very difficult, precarious, and grim. Um, Commit suicide, however, and then they would become not only a member of the most worshipped people on earth, but be paid to a prized seat in the heaven, right? So these circumcellions, probably they were the Roman Shudras, they used to commit suicide only with the sense ki I'll secure some seat in the heaven, okay? On the anniversaries of martyrs' deaths, circumcellions celebrated the deceased with long riotous bouts of drinking and dancing. The celebrations on the day of actual death were allegedly even greater, and lurid rumors spread on the orgiastic celebration and sex and hard drinking that went on after one of their number committed suicide. So circumcision जैसे मतलब एक तरह से वही weird weak jihadi I would say, like circumcisions ऐसे होते थे before even going to die, going for the martyrdom, they used to celebrate a lot कि कितना भी तुम adultery कर लो, कितना भी दारू पी लो, कुछ भी कर लो, डांस कर लो, और जो भी है मतलब orgastic pleasure, sex ये सब कर लो, इतना मतलब कुछ पाप कुछ नहीं लगने वाला है, क्योंकि बिकॉज इन रोमन ट्रेडिशन ओवर इंडल्जेंस इन एनीथिंग वाज बैड. ओके कि सर्वमति वर्जयेत कि कुछ भी करो लेकिन इतना ज्यादा मत करो कि हद से आगे हो जाए. सो रोमन्स ऑल्सो बिलीव इन दैट. ओके बट देन दीज गाइज दे यूज्ड टू थिंक यार मैं तो कुछ भी कर सकता हूँ क्योंकि मैं कुछ भी करूँ मृत्यु के बाद मुझे मार्टरडम मिलेगा. सो दे यूज्ड टू हैव ऑल दीज थिंग्स. इवन तो जब अगर सर्कमसिलियन जो समाज था उनका कोई अगर मार्टर हो गया तो the whole society will celebrate that death. Okay, the whole society then will engage themselves in all these celebrations and hard drinking and whatever mischievousness. Okay, so yeah, so this was going on. And then if we look closely at all the martyrdom stories that Christians have fabricated, we'll see that Romans in these tales want the Christians to sacrifice not because they want them to be damned in the next life, but because they want them to be saved in this one. तो ऑब्वियसली रोमन जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर थे आर्मी, उनका एक प्रैक्टिस था कि कोई बात नहीं, इफ यू डू सम मतलब रोमन पेगन सैक्रिफाइस, थोड़ा अगरबत्ती ही जला दो, थोड़ा भगवान के तरफ फूल फेंक दो, you will be spared, okay, and you will save your life. And they wanted to do this not to damn the soul of these, मतलब Christians ऐसे लिखते हैं कि the Romans used to damn the soul of these circumcisions or common Roman Christians. That's why they were doing it. No, they were doing it because they wanted to save them, right? And they simply did not want to execute, right? And in many letters there are sentences like, okay, give up this madness of yours, yield to your family's tears, think of your youth and offer sacrifice. So यहाँ पे क्लियरली बोल रहे हैं कि अपना जो फैमिली है उनका परवाह करो, अपना जो यूथ है उसको उसका परवाह करो एंड ऑफर द सैक्रिफाइस, राइट? But when Christian refuses to budge, Proverbs tries one more time. At least offer sacrifice for the sake of your children. कि बच्चों का तो ध्यान रखो, उसके लिए तो करो. When the Christian is unmoved, Proverbs issued a more explicit warning. Take thought for yourself, young man. Offer sacrifice so that I shall not put you to torture. तो बार बार समझाते थे, फिर भी ये लोग मानते नहीं थे. Some Roman officials in these tales tried unsuccessfully to jolly the would-be martyr out of it. Quote, cease this foolishness and be of good cheer with us. कि यार थोड़ा मतलब chill हो जाओ. Um, Another minister of Satan asks, in the language of Christians, asks what person with intelligence would choose to relinquish this sweetest light and prefer death to it. कि दुनिया में इतनी रोशनी है, इतना hope है, and over that you are preferring some stupid death. It is a question that many a baffled Roman governor would ask. Don't you see the beauty of this pleasant weather? There will be no, and then exhorts another, there will be no pleasure to come your way if you kill your own self. But the Christians who was advised to look at the sunny weather rebuffed his temper by declaring, quote, the death which is coming to me is more pleasant than the life which you would give me, unquote. The prefect, or as the narrative has it, the tyrant who tells the Christian to cheer up and sees his foolishness, is bluntly informed that he is the most impious of all men. While so basically, yeah, so some of them were even trying कि यार why so serious about offering some incense and going away, कि एक अगरबत्ती जला के निकल जाओ, तुम्हें छोड़ दिया जाएगा. But the emperor Marcus Aurelius disparaged martyrdom as mere stage heroics. Others saw it as simply deluded. Lucian scornfully described the Christians as those poor wretches who have convinced themselves, first and foremost, that they are going to be immortal and live for all time, in consequence of which they despise death and even willingly give themselves into custody. Okay? So these are the accounts of various administrators who are actually ridiculing the idea of this stupid Christian martyrdom. Many Romans did not like the Christians. They found their reclusive behavior offensive, their teachings foolish, their fervor irritating, and their refusal to sacrifice to the emperor insulting. But for the first 250 years after the birth of Christ, the imperial policy towards them was first to ignore them and then to declare कि they must not be hounded. कुछ दिन बाद रोमन ने छोड़ दिया था कि जो मर्जी करो यार, तुम लोगों को मार के फायदा नहीं है. This was a grace and liberty that Christians would decline to show to other religions when they finally gained control. A little over 10 years after the newly Christian Constantine the Great took power, it is said that the laws began to be passed restricting the pollutions of idolatry. During Constantine's own reign, it seems to have been decreed that no one should presume to set up cult objects or practice divination or other occult arts, or even to sacrifice at all. तो आइडोलेट्री कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द जब ग्रेट जब मतलब the sort of liberalism that the Roman aristocrats and administrators showed towards Christian, it was not reciprocated when Christianism expanded in the Roman Empire. So after the conversion of this guy, Constantine the Great, idolatry was deemed as uh, pollution, and it seemed to be decreed that no one should presume to set up cult object की मूर्ति पूजा फिर हराम हो गया रोमन एम्पायर में. Less than 50 years after Constantine, the death penalty was announced for any who dared to sacrifice. कि sacrifice, by the way, sacrifice का idea ऐसे आता है कि जो रोमन जो एलिट होते थे या जो मूर्ति पूजक होते थे वहाँ के, सो दे यूज टू सी कि मैं कुछ दे रहा हूँ भगवान को, और इसीलिए उसको सैक्रिफाइस कहा जाता है. और कुछ दे रहा हूँ मतलब वो टाइम भी हो सकता है कि आई एम गिविंग माई टाइम टू द डिवाइन. दैट्स व्हाई दैट यूज्ड टू बी कॉल्ड सैक्रिफाइस. और सैक्रिफाइस ये टाइम, गिविंग टाइम से लेके गिविंग एनिमल सैक्रिफाइस तक इसका स्पेक्ट्रम था. इट वाज अ ब्रॉड स्पेक्ट्रम ऑफ सैक्रिफाइस. बट फिर लेस देन 50 years आफ्टर कॉन्स्टेंटाइन, the death penalty was announced for anyone who dared to sacrifice. A little over a century later, in 423 AD, the Christian government announced that any pagans who still survived were to be suppressed. कि पेगन को अब जीने ही मत दो, इनका जीने का भी अधिकार नहीं है. This decree was announced in 423 AD, though it was added confidently and ominously that we quote we now believe that there are no pagan in the Roman Empire. This is 423 AD. Okay. So what we see from this first part is that कि Christianity धीरे धीरे expand किया, and there was this lethal sort of victimhood and martyrdom, uh, जिसको रोमन जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर थे वो ढंग से कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाया. That led to a lot of riots, lot of rebellions, and then when Constantine the Great was converted, it was a done deal basically. और जब कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट का कन्वर्शन हो गया, उसके बाद फिर आइडोलिट्री बैन हो गया. फिर 420 एडी में कोई आइडल वर्शिपर या फिर कोई पेगन, उनको बोला गया कि कोई भी अगर बचा है उन्हें मार दो. इस तरह से रोमन एम्पायर में बेसिकली जो रोमन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स थे, they were very much lenient and liberal toward Christianism, but Christianism was not liberal or lenient to the pagans. Okay, so ये तो चल रहा है. Now, in this part, in the upcoming second part of this lecture, we are going to discuss the time between 312 AD till I think 423 AD. And this part will include obviously the time of Constantine the Great, then Julian. Then in 392, we are going to discuss the destruction of the temple of Serapis in the Great Alexandria. Um, And yeah, so this is pretty much the plan for the rest of the discussion, right? Any question? Anything?
So we do have few questions. I'm going to take them one by one. Let's see. We have first question from Retro. Ask, uh, ask, truly Christianity and Islam are both death cults. I wonder how come Judaism,
No.
a Jewish religion, is so different from its descendants. Interesting question.
That's a very good question. अब मतलब सबके चिट क्या बोलते हैं वो काले चिट्टे खोलेंगे. ओके सो इन इस्लाम यू नो दैट इस्लाम में ये लिखा गया है कि जो आखिरत का दिन है वो तब आएगा जब uh, जब पेड़ के पीछे भी अगर कोई जीव छुपा रहेगा तो वो पेड़ बता देगा मुस्लिम्स को कि मेरे पीछे एक जीव छुपा हुआ है. ठीक है, तो दैट इज द लास्ट डे ऑफ जजमेंट फॉर द मुस्लिम्स, जहाँ पे कि एक भी जीव नहीं बचेगा और एक भी मुशरिक नहीं बचेगा. मुशरिक मतलब हिंदू, राइट? तब वो अपना लास्ट डे ऑफ जजमेंट आएगा. और फिर ऑब्वियसली जो इनका प्रॉफिट था, इन्होंने प्रॉफिट एक्चुअली initially he had some pact with the Jews, but then he uttered that कि the Arab Peninsula should be freed from the Jews. So because it became a dictum coming from the Prophet, Muslims actually are passionate about not letting any Jew alive in the Arabic Peninsula, and that include the Israel, Palestine, those part as well. That actually give them the fervor, the fundamentalist passion to eradicate Jew from Israel. Now the next part, so that part is Islam, right? But in Christianism, when these all these things were happening, uh, Judaism actually through their scriptures and through their ideas, they were telling the Christians, because Christians were like the younger brother to Judaism, right? And they're so the Judaism is the most probably the most ancient cult that talks about destruction of idols and everything, and destruction of monotheism, idols. They used to despise the Romans, but they did not have much um, power to harm the Roman nobles. But what they could do, they could write literature. They could instruct their younger brothers, the Christians, on how to break a मूर्ति exactly. वो जो एक कैसे मतलब एक मूर्ति तोड़ने से ज्यादा शबाब मिलता है, वो ये लोग रोमन एम्पायर में क्रिश्चियंस को बताते थे. दिस इज वन ऑफ द मेनी इंस्टेंसेस. ऑब्वियसली बाकी जो कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट को आइडिया देना कि किस तरह से टेम्पल लूटना है वगैरह, ये सब जो ज्यूज थे वो रोमन एम्पायर को बताते थे, एम्पायर को बताते थे.
Okay, so we have okay. Yes, yeah. There are few more things which I have already. Okay, this is an interesting. Christianism did so much killing of people that in Europe that it created the Dark Ages. Like, is that
Right.
is that some? So, is there something
See,
correct which happened?
right. So they killed a lot of people. They obviously killed a whole culture. And they burned pretty much all the libraries, right? Broke all the idols. They banned a lot of spontaneous practices. They banned pretty much everything, including theater, play, okay, नाटक जिसे कहते हैं, वो सब सारा कुछ बैन कर दिया था. So it was in real sense it was a genocide that went on in Europe for 700 800 years. And we are going to describe in this part, like in this second part, how
Hmm.
they broke the temples and everything.
Yes, that's an interesting language question or comment we have. Like pagan is a derogatory word, but the idol and nature worshippers are so open-minded, we adopt that as well. So I
Right, right.
think this is an interesting and important part, like being open to new ideas. Correct? It also you become vulnerable to also bad ideas. So and because you think, okay, let's test and see how things work. Sometimes like not having boundaries, like the way the Abrahism has, it has its own drawbacks. Like lot of bad ideas have come to us. Okay, people told
Right,
us
right.
you are, and we accept it. So, do you think that that we had talked about in our first or second lecture series, where the dharma is the ultimate part? Okay, the dharma supersedes everything else, and once we lose that boundary that we create for ourselves, we tend to be like accept everything which comes our way without evaluating it from the dharmic perspective.
Right.
Okay, so this is interesting. India's socio-economic condition today seems similar to that of
Exactly. That is
Rome
my
in the
point.
past.
That is why I am giving this lecture series to understand at what point we are right now. ठीक है, ये समझाने के लिए कि आगे क्या होगा, अभी तक क्या हुआ है, सेकुलरिज्म कहाँ से आया है, ये पूरा समझाने के लिए आई एम गिविंग द लेक्चर सीरीज, so that you can
Exactly.
find the similes. Okay, you can find the whole similarities, you can find the equivalence between what happened to that great Roman Empire and what is happening to us in post independence India. Okay.
We have a very good question from Sri Harsha. What is the reason for the failure of pagan comeback during the era of Julian, the grandson of Constantine?
Reason for the failure of a pagan comeback in the era of Julian, the grandson of Constantine. No, huh. The reason for the failure was that ki at the time of Julian, matlab Christianity propagated so much कि you could not have reversed it. So at the time of Constantine itself, Constantine actually made an agreement कि जो हमारा सेकुलर एग्रीमेंट है इंडिया का, कि सब लोग अपना अपना जो प्रैक्टिस है वो सब लोग अपने अपने हिसाब से कर सकते हैं. When you make that agreement, it obviously pagans are happy कि भाई ठीक है हम लोग अपने अपनी चीजें करेंगे because they don't feel the reason to expand their belief. But a secular agreement is a death knell for any pagan society, right? Why? Because all these Abrahamic tradition, they are not happy with the secular constitution. They are not happy with any secular agreement because they want to expand. No matter how stupid their beliefs are, they want to expand into the territory. So, after giving Article 25 and to 30, the whole minority right, are Muslims and Christians happy in India? No, they are not, because they want to expand and they see कि भाई अभी तक 100 करोड़ लोग बचे हुए हैं जो अभी तक कन्वर्ट नहीं हुआ है. In the word of Islam, this is Darul Harb. This is the house of war. कि इंडिया में एक जंग चल रहा है हमारे साथ. जंग कौन कर रहे हैं? ये जो जालिम लोग हैं. जालिम क्यों है? कुरान 2.256, जो काफिर है वही जालिम है, क्योंकि ये काफिर लोग दे एग्जिस्ट. Just by existing they are the evil doer. So we have to wipe off either the kafirs or the kufr from India.
Yeah, so this is a good question. Bijeet, please kindly tell us about Helena, the mother of Constantine, and the Emperor Constantine and Christianity.
कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट अभी हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे, बट यार हेलेना वन मुझे ये पता नहीं है, मुझे ये पढ़ना पड़ेगा फिर.
Hmm.
Probably in the next lecture I will discuss about Helena. In the context of this narrative or the story that I am going to say, Helena did not come anywhere, but I will learn about it and I will discuss it in the next lecture.
Yeah, I think this is important. Can you give us references to the books on the expansion of Christianism in Europe? What are the possible policies that will help us to stop this mental degeneracy?
Right, right. So there are multiple books. One is The Darkening Age by Catherine Nixie. One is this guy. Walker. So the name of this guy is something Walker. A History of the Christian Church by this guy W. Walker, Williston Walker. Okay. Um, and then the Barbarian Conversion by Richard Fletcher. So these are the books that I am studying right now. There was obviously there was one more book which is called which is by Leo Strauss about natural right and justice. I am studying that as well. So yeah, these are the few books from where I am pretty much preparing the lecture.
Last question we have, and members who want to join and talk to us, like please check the members only post. But I have posted the link, so if you have something to share with us, please go ahead and do it. Okay, Kanha is asking, there must be a book regarding cultural appropriation done by them. I mean, the Christians or the Abrahamics. In Kerala, they are absorbing a lot of Hindu cultural symbols, and after
Right,
100 years, they are going to claim these were non-Hindu traditions.
right. The book, yeah, Sitaram Goel, Ram Swarup, they have done enough research on this, at least for in the context of India. Sadly, for Christianity, we are yet to sort of um, write good books on this topic, actually.
Yes,
So I
I
don't know. I am working on something.
hmm.
I don't want to proclaim myself as the preacher, but हाँ I have to say कि यार अभी जैसे हमें पता चल गया इस्लाम क्या है और हम लोग उसके हिसाब से कदम उठा रहे हैं और पूरी दुनिया को पता चल गया है नथिंग न्यू बट अभी तक क्रिश्चियनिज्म का जो इविल है ना वो उसके बारे में इतना बुक्स नहीं लिखा गया है तो ये एक्चुअली दिस इज अ वेरी डेंजरस कल्ट जिसके बारे में हिंदूज को तो लिखना ही चाहिए क्योंकि एज आई सी इट ना 20-30 years down the line we don't have that much um like danger from Islam, so to say, as much as we have from the Christianism.
Bijit, just on the sidelines, correct. So when we see Ramayana, correct, when
Mm.
Ravan came to Sita in the guise of a Brahman, okay, or a bhikshu,
Mm.
correct. So in that way, I think because a lot is not known about Christianism, because evil again comes in the form of a pious man. Correct. Ravan came to kidnap Sita in the form of a Brahman, asking for alms, asking for bhiksha. So in the same way, correct, because we don't know enough, primarily because they will not show their real face and they will come in camouflage, and that gives them that advantage,
Right.
so that
No, no, true.
we don't know.
True. पहले हिंदू सोसाइटी में ये बैरियर होता था एंड हिंदूज मैनेज टू डू दैट मतलब बाय डूइंग वेरियस थिंग्स कि यार वही कि ये म्लेच्छ है ये यमन है दे आर इंफीरियर टू अस अभी क्या हुआ है बिकॉज ऑफ द इन्वेजन ऑफ द वेस्टर्न कल्चर दैट्स द प्रॉब्लम कि नाउ इंडियंस थिंक कि the culture of America, which is being portrayed in Hollywood, or the culture of Europe, or the culture of science that we see, right, in universities, those are Christian cultures. No, they are not Christian culture. Those are pagan cultures. I mean, if you study the whole sort of lineage of knowledge in these universities, apart from a few exceptions like Oxford and Cambridge, mainly Oxford, no one acknowledge these Christians basically and their work. But they acknowledge the pagan philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Cicero. Um, for example, the idea of republic, as I said, it came from the writings of Cicero. No Christian philosopher talk about republic. No Christian philosopher talk about democracy. Though no Christian philosopher talk about pluralism. No Christian philosopher talk about promoting blasphemy and freedom of speech and thought. Rather, they talk about banning theater, banning play, banning movies, banning freedom of speech, giving punishment for blasphemy, They talk about various superstitions like witch hunting. They kill women, children in the name of witch hunting, and obviously the pedophilia. Right? You have to understand the origin of pedophilia is actually these sort of cults. So the modern knowledge system or the modern sort of Hollywood, whatever you see, whatever influence you, and you think these are coming from the West and these are good things. All these good things, they are actually antithetical to Christianism. Okay, and in fact, they show it in their face. These Hollywood people, they actually want to show it on their face. Ki bhai, matlab we don't care about you. For example, in Amsterdam and all these places, they they actually set up bars and pubs and various like brothel exactly opposite churches. You will find brothel just exactly opposite church. Obviously, they want to prove a point, now. That's why they are doing it. So all these European modernism, American modernism, they were born out of the rebellion against Christianity.
So Christianism actually dawned the dark ages.
Ah, right.
Okay, this is a very good question, a comment from actually M. Shastri. Kerala and South
No,
isn't a
एक ये
problem.
पिछला पॉइंट था जो फ्रेंच के बारे में था.
Yeah, that I
Historia
showed.
में.
Yeah, this one.
You should read about White Revolution and post WW2 France. I will read about it. Thank you.
And M. Shastri, again, one has a good comment. Kerala and South isn't a problem as much as Northeast. We need help. We need to help those tribes return to pre-Christian traditions. South's rise backs are
Hmm.
easy to deal with.
Right, right. Agreed. Now, yeah, I mean, I don't have that much exposure about what is going on in the Northeast. Um, but obviously, if you want to give a counter to Christianism, it has to be only through books and scriptures. This is my belief.
And on that context actually, because I have done bit of like groundwork or maybe been to places, correct? So we have a lot of tribal communities, underprivileged people, correct, who are the primary targets of the Christian missionaries. Okay, so and education plays a very important part in that specific context because they can give the books and the brainwashing at the same time as as an excuse for education. So those who are actually like able to do something, I would suggest get connected to Sangh RSS because RSS has done a like commendable work in Northeast to actually stem the flow of conversions. Okay, in Northeast specifically, where they have Vidya Bharati schools where they give free education and teach kids about their local traditions. So anyway, if you can help in any way, Vidya Bharati and the Sangh affiliate organizations who are actually helping in that to actually stem or even sometimes get them to return to their old spiritual faith, that's very important. So in that case, if even if you can spend 1 hour, spare 1 hour, teach underprivileged kids, maybe you will see a lot of people, kids on the basti or the slums are there, you being there and teaching them so that the other people cannot come with rice bags and tell them that your gods are evil. So in that way, we don't have to just wait. Somebody will do something about it. If you have enough education, if you have enough time, you can spend some hours, help the communities to uplift themselves, and that will be your contribution, a small contribution that is needed right now and in the coming years to make that happen. So do consider that. Okay. Because end of the day, we all have to contribute in our small way. We cannot just wait for people that okay somebody else will do it. You are the somebody who's going to do it. And we have the last comment from this precisely. Quiet revolution started exactly to limit
Right, right. And
the
even
oppression
this
of
is a
the.
culture. This is a culture in the US, and everyone who stays in US knows this, कि कहीं भी अगर चर्च बंद होता है ना, तो वहाँ पे एक बियर मतलब एक ब्रूअरी खुलता है. So they open a brewery on churches, whichever get closed. ठीक है. So obviously हमारे सेंस में अगर कोई टेम्पल बंद हो रहा है और वहां पे अगर दारू खाना, शराब खाना खुल रहा है, इट विल बी वेरी शॉकिंग टू अस, राइट. कोई करने नहीं देगा, इंडिया के सोसाइटी में ये करने भी नहीं देगा. बट इट इज वेरी कॉमन, इट इज अ कल्चरल थिंग इन द यूएस टू ओपन अ ब्रूअरी ऑन चर्चेस, ऑन क्लोज चर्चेस. ठीक है. सो ऑब्वियसली कहीं से तो आ रहा है ये चीज. ये एक रेबेल ही करेगा. दिस इज मतलब रेबेलियस थॉट, इसलिए वो लोग करते हैं. एंड
And yes,
इसीलिए
reaction.
चर्च यूएस में अभी जैसे क्रिश्चियन नेशनलिज्म के बात उठ रहा है. ठीक है. यूएस इज सेइंग कि वी आर, जैसे इंडिया में हिंदुत्व का बात उठता है ना, उसको शायद कॉपी करके ये लोग बोल रहे हैं कि अमेरिका इज ए क्रिश्चियन नेशन एंड वी हैव टू ब्रिंग क्रिश्चियन नेशनलिज्म. एंड वो जो चार्ली कर्क वाला हुआ, वो बोल रहा था कि जो द फाउंडर्स, द फादर्स ऑफ यूएस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशंस, दो दे वर हेवीली इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय क्रिश्चियनिटी. ठीक है. Now question is, in the matlab, if you just research on the surface, you don't have to go deep. You will clearly see कि the idea of liberty हो जाए, idea of freedom हो जाए, idea of happiness हो जाए. Those were Greco-Roman idea that these founders borrowed from the pagan traditions in Europe. They did not borrow pretty much anything from the European Christianity, because when they reached in the US, they got sick of it. So all these ideas based on which US constitution was written and founded was actually the pagan ideas and not Christian ideas. ठीक है.
Okay, Bijit, before we close this session, I wanted to share something because this is an
नहीं
interesting.
क्लोज नहीं, अभी तो अभी थोड़ा और रह गया है.
Okay,
आई थिंक मे बी
okay. Do you want?
सेकंड
Okay,
पार्ट.
so continue. Then I will be sharing one more thing, just data. So just
हाँ
continue
हाँ हाँ.
again. I'll be again back.
अच्छा ठीक है.
I'm in the
चलो
background, just
फिर.
checking the.
हाँ, द नेक्स्ट पार्ट. सो इन दिस पार्ट वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट, so this is the second part where we're going to talk about Constantine the Great and the things that he did, right? All these destructions and the genocides thereafter, right? So, as per the Christian folklore, it is in October 312 AD when the Emperor Constantine, he saw some vision, okay, in the history of Europe, and he saw something ki on the sky there was a cross, and next to it were the words conquered by this sword. Okay. Then Constantine and his army, aided by the religion of the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, went on to win the battle, and Constantine thus converted to Christianity and saved the continent of Europe. At least this is the canonical folklore of Christianity. And then Constantine, they say, he moved quickly to promote this new religion of Christianity. On the following year, in 313 AD, he said that the persecution of Christians are over. Indeed, the Edict of Milan was said to have promised much more than that. It announced that every man may have complete toleration in the practice of whatever worship he has chosen. This was a wonderful time, wrote the historian Eusebius, and he wrote that quote, men had now lost all fear of their former oppressors. Light was everywhere. They danced and sang in city and country alike. तो ये कहानी सुनाया जाता है क्रिश्चियनिज्म में. बट एक्चुअली ये इतना सही नहीं है जितना हंकी डोरी वे में ये प्रेजेंट किया जाता है. ठीक है. सो ऑब्वियसली द क्रिश्चियन हिस्ट्री, दे रिकॉल कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट एज preeminent in every virtue, and he is the epitome of an emperor a true religion can confer, right? But the if we look at the contemporary historical record of his time, the non-Christians used to look down upon this emperor. Okay, and there are very many reasons behind this. So the first reason was that he probably he was involved in murdering his wife, his own wife. Okay, so apparently he had allegedly boiled her in a bath because of a suspected affair with his son, and now he was basically over poured in grief, and he needed to overcome this guilt, and he went to various oracles and various sort of quote unquote gurus of Roman Empire. But everyone said कि the crime that he has done, it cannot be, he cannot be purified of this. ठीक है कि जो कर्म है वो तो भुगतना पड़ेगा. And they proclaimed that Constantine the Great is polluted and no right could cleanse him. Now, at that very moment of his personal crisis, Constantine the Great happened to fall into the conversation with a man, probably a Christian man, and obviously a Christian man, who assured him that the Christian doctrine would teach him how to cleanse himself from all his offenses, and that they who received it were immediately absolved from all their sins. So Constantine believed it and then he converted. Now, uh, this was one reason that Constantine was a murderer of his wife, for which he used to be looked down upon by the very prajas, right, by the very common man of this empire. There were a few other reasons. Like Constantine was very much like Donald Trump. Okay, generally क्या होता था कि in the Roman Empire, um, all those emperors who used to look gaudy with like draping in gold, uh, sort of जिसे बोलते conspicuous consumption. All those kings who used to do conspicuous consumptions used to be looked down upon. ओके, राजा ऐसा नहीं करना चाहिए, राजा को ज्यादा सोना वोना नहीं दिखाना चाहिए पहने, मतलब राजा को पॉपुलरिटी नहीं बनना चाहिए. ठीक है, बट कॉन्स्टेंटाइन वाज प्रिसाइजली लाइक डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प और पॉपुलरिटी. ठीक है, in modern sense he was pretty much like Donald Trump. Because of this reason also Roman people used to mock this guy, this emperor. But अब जब कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट कन्वर्ट हो गया, देश उसका जो गुस्सा है, उसका जो, so he now think he is absolved of all these sins, right? So next he wanted to target the very prajas. ठीक है, so हाँ, it wasn't only Constantine's imperial person that was draped in gold. The church, so recently persecuted, suddenly found itself the unexpected recipient of staggering amount of money. One bishop was told that if he were to ask the emperor's finance officer for any sum, he is to arrange for its transfer to you without question. कि बिशप जाके कुछ भी सोना वोना मांग लेता था, उसे देना पड़ता था जो फाइनेंस ऑफिसर था उसको. Tax relief was given to church lands. Clerics were exempted from public duties. Bishops were lavished with gifts and banquets. Annual allowances were given to widows, virgins, and nuns. The expensive list went on. The vast churches Constantine built were astonishing. The decorations really are too marvelous for words, wrote one odd pilgrim to the Church of Holy Sepulchre. All you can see is gold and jewels and silk. The magnificent building itself was decorated with gold, mosaic, and precious marble. These buildings spoke volume about where Constantine's allegiances now lay. They were sermons in stone, as modern historian Peter Brown has beautifully described them. This was about architecture. It wasn't about architecture, it was also about intent. सो जब कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट जब कन्वर्ट हो गया, देन वो चर्च को टैक्स रिलीफ देना चालू किया, क्लेरिक्स को पैसा देना चालू किया, बिशॉप्स को गिफ्ट देना चालू किया. ठीक है, वहाँ पे जो क्रिश्चियन त्योहार जो जो ये लोग इन्वेंट कर रहे थे उसको मनाना चालू किया. एंड ऑब्वियसली चर्चेस को गोल्ड, ज्वेल, सिल्क ये सब गिफ्ट करना चालू कर दिया. एंड अगेन you see the similarity of what the modern Indian state is doing and what Constantine the Great was doing right after he got converted. Right? This is exactly what probably um, Raga would do, right? Probably people like Rahul Gandhi would do, um, if and when he becomes the Prime Minister of India. Okay, the funds for all this had to be found from somewhere. Now, Constantine turned to those accursed and foul people who had chosen to stubbornly hold themselves back from Christianity and continue visiting their sanctuaries of falsehood. In other words, those people who would soon be called pagans. ये पेगन वर्ड उस टाइम पे आया, और फिर फंड चाहिए था चर्च वर्च बिल्ड करने का. तो ये जो पैसा था ये पेगन से लेने वाले थे, राइट. क्रिश्चियन ऑफिशियल्स, सो इट वाज सेड, traveled the empire, ordering the priests of the old religion to bring their statues out of temples. From the 330s onward, some of the most sacred objects in the empire started to be removed. It is hard today to understand the enormity of Constantine's order. If Michelangelo's Pieta were taken from the Vatican and sold, it would be considered a terrible act of cultural vandalism. But it wouldn't be sacrilege, as the statue is not in itself sacred. Statues in Roman temples were sacred. To remove them was a gross violation, and Constantine knew it. तो अभी जैसे मॉडर्न इंडिया में क्या हुआ था, मॉडर्न इंडिया में जब अंग्रेज ने आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया बनाया, द वेरी फर्स्ट थिंग दैट दे डिड वाज कि रिमूविंग द स्टैचूज फ्रॉम द टेम्पल्स एंड सेंड देम टू म्यूजियम. ना अगर कोई स्टैचू को टेम्पल से निकाल के म्यूजियम में डालते हो तो ऑब्वियसली उसका पूजा नहीं होता, और उसी के साथ जो सैंक्टम सेंटोरम है, जो अपना गर्भगृह है, वहां से अपना जो मूर्ति है वो निकाला जाता है, तो गर्भगृह फिर खाली हो जाता है. मूर्ति प्राणहीन मतलब जो गर्भगृह है, जो मंदिर है, वो एक तरह से प्राणहीन हो जाता है. अंग्रेजों ने आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया बना के एग्जैक्टली यही काम किया जो कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट ने उस टाइम पे किया था, कि मंदिरों से सारे जो मूर्ति है उसको हटाओ और फिर खुले बाजार में बेच दो या तोड़ दो. ठीक है, दिस इज जस्ट लाइक, बट इट इज इवन मोर सीवियर देन सेइंग कि जो लुवरे म्यूजियम के जितने भी आर्टिफैक्ट है, या फिर वेटिकन से जो पीटा का जो स्टैचू है, मदर मेरी का जो विथ जीसस ऑन हर लैप, उसको निकाल दो तो कैसा लगेगा. बट वो पीटा एक्चुअली इट इज नॉट स्पीच, मतलब इट्स नॉट मूर्ति जिसका पूजा हो रहा है, राइट. तो कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट इससे भी ग्रेव क्राइम किया था विद द रोमन पेगन्स. Indeed, the insult was part of that attraction. Many of Constantine's subjects still feared and venerated their vain idols. Why wouldn't they? The history of Greco-Roman cult stretched back a millennium and more, long before the pages of Homer into prehistory. तो वहाँ तो मूर्ति पूजा मतलब इतने दिनों से चल रहा था जिसका कोई ठीक मतलब क्रोनोलॉजी नहीं है, राइट. इतना एंशियंट था. बट कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट ने ये सब कर दिया. ठीक है, he realized that conversion would be more easily accomplished if he could get them to despise their temples and the images contained therein. And what better way to teach wayward pagans the vanity of their gods than by cracking open their statues and showing what they were, quite literally empty. Moreover, a religious system in which sacrifice was central would struggle to survive if there was nothing to sacrifice to. There was a good biblical precedent for his actions. In Deuteronomy, God had commanded that his chosen people should overthrow altars, burn sacred groves, and hew down the graven images of the god. If Constantine attacked the temples, then he was not being a vandal, he was doing God's good work. सो ये जो मूर्ति तोड़ना, टेम्पल तोड़ना, ये जो परंपरा है, ये क्रिश्चियन के ड्यूटेरोनोमी में लिखा गया है. सो आइडल डिस्ट्रक्शन एंड टेम्पल पेगन टेम्पल डिस्ट्रक्शन, it is a commandment of God in Christianism. Okay, so it began. The great Roman and Greek temples, or so Eusebius said, broken open and their statues brought out, then mutilated. Officials scraped off material which seemed to be usable, purifying it by smelting with fire, then poured into precious metal into the public purse. The valueless remains were left for the superstitious to keep as the souvenir of their shame. कि मूर्ति को पिघला के सोना वोना निकाल के लोगों को दिया जाता था as the souvenir of their shame. The emperor, however, did not stop there. The temples themselves were attacked. Their doors were removed at his order. Others had their roofs stripped. Others were neglected, allowed to fall into ruin or destroyed. जो इंडिया में हमारे टेम्पल के साथ किया गया, पहले मुसलमानों ने किया, फिर ब्रिटिश ने किया, अभी सेकुलर इंडिया जो कर रहा है कि पुराने जो टेम्पल है उसे गिरने दो, क्या फर्क पड़ता है. One shrine was demolished. A temple in Cilicia was razed to the ground. According to Eusebius, Constantine's planned work and quote, nations and citizens spontaneously renounced their former opinion. तो इस तरह से जब मतलब जिल्लत चालू किया, फिर पेगन लोग कन्वर्ट होना चालू हो गए. द वर्ड स्पॉन्टेनियस कोट अनकोट इट सीम्स इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट लिटिल टेनुअस. स्पॉन्टेनियस तो नहीं हो रहे थे कि अगर किसी का मूर्ति तोड़ोगे और टेम्पल तोड़ोगे और फिर वो कन्वर्ट हो जाएगा, तो स्पॉन्टेनियस एक्ट ऑफ कन्वर्शन है नहीं. Anyway, not all the temple statues were melted down. The tyrant Constantine also had an eye for art, and many objects were shipped back as prize baubles for the emperor's new city, Constantinople. तो कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल तो नया एक सिटी बना रहे थे जो, तो यहाँ से जो मूर्ति वूर्ति है, स्टैचू है, उसको लेके कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल में एक्सपोर्ट किया और वहाँ जो सजाने का काम में ये सब मूर्ति लगा दिया. The Pythian Apollo was put up as a contemptible spectacle in one square. The sacred tripods of Delphi turned up in Constantinople's Hippodrome, while the muses of Helicon found themselves relocated to Constantine's palace. The capital looked wonderful. The temples looked desecrated. As his biographer wrote with satisfaction, Constantine, quote, confuted the superstitious error of the heathen in all sorts of ways. कि जितने तरीके से डिस्ट्रॉय कर सकते थे कॉन्स्टेंटाइन ने वो कर दिया. And yet, despite the horror of what Constantine was asking his subject to do, there was very little resistance. कि लोगों को डर था कि अगर राजा ऐसा कर रहा है और हम लोग कुछ बोलने जाए तो हमें मार दिया जाएगा. जैसे अभी सुप्रीम कोर्ट में बोल दिया कि जाओ विष्णु से प्रे करो, वो खुद का मुंडी लगा देगा. और इसके खिलाफ अगर कोई आवाज उठाएगा तो ऑब्वियसली कॉन्टेम्प्ट ऑफ कोर्ट हो जाएगा. तो उसी तरह से कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट जब तोड़ रहे थे तब किसी ने इतना आवाज भी नहीं किया, शायद डर के वजह से नहीं किया. इन मेनी सिटीज पीपल स्पॉन्टेनियसली विदाउट एनी कमांड ऑफ द एम्परर डिस्ट्रॉयड द एडजेसेंट टेम्पल्स एंड स्टैचूज एंड इरेक्टेड हाउसेस ऑफ प्रेयर. ठीक है, तो जब कॉन्स्टेंटाइन द ग्रेट ये काम करना चालू कर दिया तब क्रिश्चियंस को मतलब ऑब्वियसली साहस मिल गया एंड उन्होंने जो टेम्पल था, स्टैचूज था, वो तोड़ना चालू कर दिया. वो तोड़ के या तो कन्वर्ट करके उसी मतलब जो मलबा था, जो रूइन था, उसी से अपना हाउस ऑफ प्रेयर बनाना चालू कर दिया या पूरी तरीके से डिस्ट्रॉय कर दिया, डिमोलिश कर दिया. Christianity would have been tolerant. It was not preordained that it would take this path. There were Christians who voiced hope for tolerance, but those hopes were dashed. For those who wish to be intolerant, monotheism provides very powerful weapons. This was ample. There were ample biblical justifications for the persecution of the non-believers. The Bible, as a generation of Christian authors declared, is very clear on the matter of idolatry. As the Christian authors, Maternus reminded his ruler perfectly correctly, there lay upon emperors as imperative necessity to castigate and punish this evil of idol worshipping. Their severity should be visited in every way on the crime. And what precisely did God advise as a punishment for idolatry? Deuteronomy was clear about this. A person indulging in idolatry should be stoned to death. जो मूर्ति पूजा करता है, बाइबल बोलता है कि उसे पत्थर मार मार के मार दो. एंड इफ एन एंटायर सिटी फेल इनटू द आइडोलेट्री, इनटू द सीन ऑफ आइडोलेट्री, अगर पूरा शहर अगर मूर्ति पूजक है, देन द आंसर वाज क्लियर, डिस्ट्रक्शन इज डिक्रीड. उस शहर को तबाह कर दो. The destruction continued for centuries. In the 5th century AD, the colossal statue of Athena, sacred centerpiece of Acropolis in Athens, and one of the most famous works of art in the empire, was torn down from where she had stood guard for almost 1,000 years and shipped off to Constantinople, a great coup for the Christian city and a great insult to the pagans. This act of imperial defilement haunted the dreams of one Athenian philosopher. He had a nightmare in which Athena, now homeless, came to him seeking shelter. कि सपनों में अथीना वो देवी आई थी और सहारा मांग रही थी. Other philosophers who so loathed this aggressive new religion that they could not bring themselves even to say the word Christian took to calling them the people who move that which should not be moved. कि जिन चीजों को हिलाना नहीं चाहिए उनको ये हिला रहे हैं. ठीक है, क्रिश्चियन नहीं बोलते थे उनको, ये टर्म देके बात करते थे कि जिस चीजों को हिलाना नहीं चाहिए ये लोग इनको हिलाते हैं. A market in plundered art developed, and Christians, braving demonic reprisals, took to leveling out and selling statues that were particularly valuable. In their turn, polytheists, realizing that a good artistic pedigree might save a statue from mutilation, started chiseling false attribution into the statue's bases. कि चोर बाजार क्रिएट हो गया. ये जो प्लंडर्ड जो स्टैचू और आर्ट जो होता था वो बेचने के लिए चोर बाजार हो चालू हो गया और क्रिश्चियंस इनको बेच के पैसा कमाते थे. इवन पेगन्स भी, पॉलिथिस्ट भी, कि शायद मूर्ति सेव हो जाए इसलिए बेच देते थे. सेम काम ये जो मूर्ति का जो चोरा बाजार में बेचना, ये अपना जो गांधी फैमिली है ये लोग भी इसमें इन्वॉल्व थे. और देयर आर सम रिपोर्ट्स विच सेज कि इसमें जो सोनिया है, सोनिया जी, वो इस चीज में इन्वॉल्व है. सो दिस इज ऑब्वियसली सोनिया जी इज टेकिंग द इंस्पिरेशन फ्रॉम क्रिश्चियनिटी एंड नो वेयर एल्स. ठीक है,
Uh, Bijitda, that is allegedly.
एलिजेडली वो इन्वॉल्व है. मैं इसलिए सोनिया जी बोला, मैं कोई गांधी वांधी नहीं लगाया. और जब गांधी फैमिली बोल रहा हूँ किसका बात कर रहा हूँ. सो देयर इज अ जोक कि ना बापू को महात्मा कहा जा सकता है और ना इनको गांधी. एनीवे, तो the inhabitants of Olympus, having become Christians, live here undisturbed. For here at least they will escape the cauldron that melts them down for petty change. ठीक है, तो इस तरह से ये सब चल रहा था. राइट. हाँ, तो फिर ऑब्वियसली क्रिश्चियन हिस्टोरियन यहाँ पे काफी ज्यादा बोलते हैं कि यार ये जो कॉन्वर्शन था दैट वाज काफी स्मूथ, और इसमें ज्यादा कुछ राइट भी नहीं हुआ, कोई डिस्ट्रक्शन भी नहीं हुआ. जैसे पूरा मतलब इट वाज द डिग्री ऑफ टाइम कि ये होना था, बिकॉज पेगनिज्म वाज अ इंफीरियर बिलीफ, क्रिश्चियनिज्म वाज अ सुपीरियर बिलीफ. तो इसलिए बेसिकली द सिविलाइजेशन मूव टुवर्ड्स अ सुपीरियर बिलीफ. बट ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं था. Right? When historians come to tell how an empire, entire empire, had turned so swiftly from sacrificing to Serapis to worshipping Christ, their narratives often carry more than a shade of seven sleepers. When the Melchiors walked into the Ephesus, he does not bump into any worshippers of Artemis, disgruntled that Christian zealots have torn down her statues and erected crosses all over their cities. ठीक है, तो इस तरह से दिस गोज ऑन. एंड देन या यहाँ पे और एक चीज मैं बोलना चाहता था, वो ये है कि हाँ, other historians still do describe the adoption of Christianity as a boon to the flagging empire. A recent popular book on the manuscript presents the transition to Christianity as a sort of pragmatic civil regeneration scheme, explaining that under pressure from barbarian attack, Rome saved its identity by reinventing itself as a Christian empire. Christianity in these accounts was not a sudden imposition, it was a release, a relief, a salvation. Modern historians glibly refer to the moment of Constantine's conversion as the end of persecution. The phrase triumph of Christianity is used frequently, uncritically, and with positive overtone. जैसे अब अभी मान लो इंडिया कन्वर्ट हो गया, फिर क्रिश्चियन लोग बोलना चालू किया यार पाकिस्तान बैठा था, उससे बचने के लिए हिंदुइज्म काफी नहीं था, नो इसलिए इंडियंस को जो हिंदू थे उनको क्रिश्चियन बनना पड़ा. This is similar sort of analysis of the whole history around that time, right? So, empire of tens of millions of people do not abandon religions that they have observed for over a millennia, almost overnight without at least some disturbances. The Roman Empire was no different. Many did convert willingly and happily to Christianity, but many did not. At the moment when Constantine had supposedly seen that flaming cross, quote unquote, the vast majority of the empire was not Christian, right? So, and with these tens of millions of people singing and dancing in street and looking at each other with smiling faces and shining eyes as their temples were being smashed? No, it seems very unlikely they did that. And yet, historians have shown a magnificent indifference to their reactions. History is written by the winners, and the Christian victory was absolute. The church dominated European thought for more than a millennium. Until 1871, the University of Oxford required that all students were members of the Church of England. तो ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी का 1871 तक ये रिक्वायरमेंट था कि यू हैव टू बी a member of the Church of England. While in most cases, to be given a fellowship in an Oxford college, one had to be ordained. Cambridge was a little freer, but not much. This was not an atmosphere conducive to criticism of Christianity. And indeed, in English histories, there was little. So, for 1,000 years, Christianism created that ecosystem, right? Which was absolute totalitarian and like pro-Christian to the maximum extent, to the extent that no criticism of Christianism was allowed in Europe and in those universities. So for centuries, the vast majority of historians unquestioningly took up the Christian cause and routinely and derogatorily referred to non-Christians as pagans, heathens, and idolaters. The practices and sufferings of these pagans were routinely belittled, trivialized, and entirely ignored. As one modern scholar had observed, the story of early Christian history has been told almost wholly on the basis of Christian sources, right? But look at the moment, at the spread of Christianity from the other side, and what emerges is a far less easy picture. The brief and sporadic Roman persecutions of Christians would pale in comparison to what Christians inflicted on others, not to mention on their own heretics. If this seems implausible, then consider one simple fact. In the world today, there are over 2 billion Christians, and there is not one single true pagan. Roman persecutions left a Christianity vigorous enough not only to survive, but to thrive and to take control of an empire. By contrast, by the time the Christian persecutions had finally finished, an entire religious system had been all but wiped from the face of the earth. Right? So this is how Christianity dominated, Christianism dominated Europe and destroyed all other form of worship from the soil of Europe. And in the same way, I want to mention one more thing to explain how Christianism spread into Egypt, for example, right? So Egypt. So Egypt पहले pagan थे, then they become Christian partly, and then partly they became this the become Muslim right after that. So obviously because Egypt was a very prosperous pagan place, right? A very prosperous pagan empire overall. And the temple that we are going to talk about here, it was the most magnificent building of the ancient world. It was the temple of Serapis. It was temple of Serapis in the Great Alexandria. All right. So right at the end of the first century of Christian rule, you know that so the whole jhagda was going on in Christian empire, but obviously it was Colosseum, right? that was dominating the architecture of Rome at that time, the city of Rome. And then the Parthenon was actually dominating the skyline and the overall architectural beauty of Athens. Now, the point here is these are the two most famous pagan structure of the ancient Greco-Roman Empire, right? But when the writers of that period of the ancient age, when they are writing about the most magnificent monument of the ancient world that used to engender like wonder and shock to everyone who were intellectual of that time or traveler or businessman, it was not Colosseum, it was not Parthenon, but it was the Temple of Serapis, and this was a temple in Egypt. This building was so fabulous that writers of the ancient world struggled to find ways to convey its beauty. And they are writing that its splendor is such that mere words can only do it an injustice. So, but outside the academia, very few people of our age know about Temple of Serapis because in 392 AD, a bishop, supported by a band of fanatical Christians, reduced this great temple to rubble. Okay, so obviously this was the temple that attracted the Christians' attention because standing at the top of 100 or more marble steps, it had once towered over the startling white marble streets below in the Alexandria, and an object to incite not only wonder but to envy. While Christians of the time crammed into insufficient numbers of small, cramped, dirty looking churches, this was a vast and vastly superior pagan monument to the old gods. It was one of the first buildings you noticed as you sailed towards Alexandria, its roof looming above the others, and one that you were unlikely to forget. Alexander founded several Alexandrias, but this great Alexandria in Egypt was an admirably elegant city. Its landmarks have become landmarks in the history of culture and architecture. I mean, they had the great lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the wonders of the ancient world, that was there, as to was a museum, and that literally, I mean, a shrine to the gods, but also it had walkways, it had libraries, lecture hall, dining room, and residence for the academia people, right? And also it was a forerunner of modern universities. Here too was the great library of Alexandria. It has been said that Julius Caesar was so impressed by the city that he had returned home determined to improve Rome. सो जूलियस सीजर यहाँ से घूम घूम के आए, फिर सोचा कि रोम को मैं अलेक्जेंड्रिया की तरह बनाऊंगा. एंड अबव ऑल दीज बिल्डिंग्स, द मोस्ट ब्यूटीफुल देन एनी was the temple of Serapis. By 392 AD, some of what Caesar had admired had gone due to the invasion of the Christians and vandalism of the Christians, but the temple of Serapis still stood and still awed all who came. To reach it, a visitor would have to climb up that grand flight of steps to the shrine's citadel like walls. Behind the porticos of the inner court, one would find the remnants of the great library of Alexandria. The library's collection was now stored here within the temple precinct for safekeeping. Excavations in the 1940s, it uncovered 19 uniform rooms where it is thought the books were shelved. Thousands of volumes on every topic from religion to mathematics were sitting on those shelves. To the new generation of Christian clerics, however, Serapis was not a wonder of art, or it was not a place of knowledge, or a much beloved local god. Serapis was a demon, and in 392 AD, the city's bishop decided to act against this demon once and for all. Theophilus, the new bishop of Alexandria, had been preparing for this moment for months from birth, if one is to believe his biographer. When he was a mere child, it was said the boy's nurse had taken him to a temple of Artemis and Apollo to pray, As he had entered the temple with Theophilus in her arms, the statues of the gods had spontaneously crashed to the ground and broken into pieces. This then was a man destined for destruction. As an adult, Theophilus was a little more compromising. The cross, he said in one less than milk and honey homily, is that which closed the temples of the idols and opened the churches and crowns them. The cross is that which has confounded the demons and made them flee in terror. Fierce words, but Christians had been fulminating in this way for decades, and polytheists had been able to ignore them. But the world was changing. It was now 80 years since a Christian had first sat on the throne of Rome, and in the intervening decades, the religion of the Lamb had taken an increasingly bullish attitude to all those who refused it. Since taking control in Alexandria, Theophilus had lived up to his early promise as a statue smashing scourge. A little earlier, he had stolen the most sacred objects from two temples, paraded them through the streets for Christians to mock. The worshippers of the old gods were shocked and enraged. This was a gross and unprompted act of sacrilege. And Christians afterwards were attacked and even killed by outraged pagan worshippers. मतलब riot लग गया था. Upsetting and unedifying through the incident was it would be utterly eclipsed by what was about to follow. One day, early in 392 AD, a large crowd of Christians started to mass outside the temple, with Theophilus at its head. And then, to the distress of the watching Alexandrians, this crowd, this Vandal crowd, had surged up to the steps. They surged up the steps into the sacred precinct and burst into the most beautiful building in the world. And then they began to destroy it. Theophilus' righteous followers began to cheer at those famous artworks, the lifelike statues and gold plated walls. There was a moment's hesitation when they came to the massive statue of the god. Rumor had it that if Serapis was harmed, then the sky would fall in. Theophilus ordered a soldier to take his axe and hit it. The soldier struck Serapis' face with a double headed axe. The god's great ivory profile, blackened by the centuries of smoke, shattered. The watching Christians roared with delight and then, emboldened, surged down to complete the job. Serapis' head was wrenched from his neck. The feet and hands were chopped off with axes, dragged apart with ropes, then for good measure burned. As one delighted Christian chronicler put it, the decrepit dotard Serapis was burned to ashes before the eyes of the Alexandria, which had worshipped him. The giant torso of the god was saved for a mere public humiliation. It was taken into the amphitheater and burned in front of a great crowd. And that was the end of the vain superstition and ancient error of Serapis. A little later, a church housing the relics of Saint John the Baptist was built on the temple's ruins, a final insult to the god and to architecture. It was naturally the church was an inferior structure. The tens of thousands of books, the remnants of the greatest library in the world, were all lost, never to reappear. Perhaps they were burned. As the modern scholar Luciano Canfora observed, the burning of the books was part of the advent and imposition of Christianity. A war against the pagan temples was also a war against the books that had all too often been stored inside them for safekeeping, a concept that from now on could only be recalled with irony. If they were burned, then this was a significant moment in what Canfora has called the melancholy experiences of the war waged by Christianity against the old culture and its sanctuaries, which meant against the libraries. Over 1,000 years later, Edward Gibbon raged at this waste. The appearance of the empty shells excited the regret and indignation of every spectator, whose mind was not wholly darkened with religious prejudice. So far more than a temple had gone. As the news of the destruction spread across the empire, something of the spirit of the old culture died too. It was said that many Alexandrians, seeing what had happened to the temple, converted to Christianity instantly. This was a terrifying act of aggression. Philosophers and poets fled the city in horror. The sky had not, as the old superstition had threatened, fallen in, but something had gone. A terrible melancholy settled among those intellectuals who dared to remain. As one Greek professor wrote in despair, quote, the dead used to leave the city alive behind them, but we living now carry the city to our grave. So this is the destruction of Temple of Serapis by the Christians. Yeah, so I would like to end it here because it is almost 2 hours, and we can take some questions.
Yes. So I think we had taken, there are few questions. Let me see. Okay, so not questions, but we have a few comments. So from Sri Harsa book, The Rise of Western Christendom, the X to it has some references. That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you write it? So I think Bhupenda has tweeted our this lecture, right? Fourth lecture. Why don't you just tweet it there, and I can so that I can collect it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you will find the post is there on our X
Ah,
account. Just comment on that so that we'll able to catch it.
sure, sure, sure.
Okay, so we don't have comments or interesting questions, but what I want to show was something which is it's known to many people, but not too many people actually know it. So we are seeing a kind of let's say like a nano or a micro revival of pagan practices in Europe specifically.
Hmm.
So like this is an article where it is written by Robin Douglas, so where it documenting the kind of like a micro minority is again trying to revive their old traditions. Okay, so this is an interesting article. I have put the link as well in the chat. So just to give
Who
another
are trying to
perspective,
revive it? Sorry, who are trying to revive?
in Europe, in
Okay,
Europe,
okay.
there is it is the article is written by the old gods return, the strange story of pagan revival.
I have
Specifically,
read it. I have read it.
yeah, specifically in Europe. So actually, you had mentioned correct in our last podcast yesterday that if we can, okay, I think we have a question here from M Shastri. Have you studied Korea and Christianity? That's,
No, not yet.
interest-
Um, Korea,
it,
India, Japan, and the relation of these countries with Christianity. I have to study, and probably, yeah, I am working toward it. Probably, it will be my third book. Um, yeah, and probably take a couple of years or 1 year. I don't know. Here I am doing a job, so it take time over and
yeah,
above my.
but we are going to touch upon the Korea, Japan and Christianity in our Japan series. Okay, so for people who are watching this, so let me see if I have it here. Yeah, we do have it. So tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. IST, we are going to do a podcast on caste in Japan. So this is the podcast we have scheduled for tomorrow. Japan had a caste system. Wait till you hear this. So the curious case of caste in Japan, okay, and how Japan had a similar kind of caste system that we have seen in Bharat.
Most
So
missionaries in India are Korean. Huh, that is an information. Okay.
most, maybe a large number, but not sure about most being that.
I will have to check. This is the cult जो आगे 20-30 साल में और खतरनाक होने वाला है और इसके लिए आई थिंक वी हैव टू अगर कोई जगह कास्टिज्म है मतलब जो भी है इनइक्वालिटी है वो मिटाना होगा इंडिया को जल्द से जल्द. एंड ऑल्सो जो क्रिश्चियन स्कूल्स है मिशनरी स्कूल उसको नेशनलाइज करना होगा. These are the things we can do like just by the stroke of a pen, right? I mean, कोई एक ऑर्डिनेंस लाके कर सकते हैं. We have to do
Yeah,
it.
correct. But I think what we need to understand is correct. When we had the debate yesterday, where the M Shastri and other people were joining in our audience, our reaction to Ajit Bharti's podcast with Prachyam, correct. So the concept of Hindu Rajyam, correct, the Hindu state, not the Hindu Rashtra as a nation. So the difference between nation and state. So you'll be able to do all those things by stroke of a pen. Do all these things only if you have state power.
Right.
So with with the Abrahamic perspective ideology being there, correct. The only way you can actually fight them is having state power. So without state power, you'll not be able to do a lot of things.
True,
The
true,
way
true.
the way the state functions. So in that way, correct, the aspiration of a Hindu Rashtra, it has to supersede with Hindu Rajya. With Hindu Rashtra, you will not be able to achieve or do things which you want to do. So the aspiration has to go up for us, not to settle just to settle with Hindu Rashtra itself,
Right, right.
even if it even if it's there or not.
हाँ मतलब हिंदू राष्ट्र हिंदू राज्य वो तो लंबा क्वेश्चन है यार. एक
No,
ग्राउंड
no.
लेवल पे क्रिश्चियनिटी एक्चुअली ग्राउंड लेवल पे खेलता है. ये भी हो
Yeah,
सकता है
yeah.
कि तुमने अनाउंस कर दिया हिंदू राष्ट्र हिंदू राज्य,
Hmm.
उसके बाद ये जो वायरस है वो अंदर ही अंदर फैलता है. मतलब द रोमन स्टेट
Hmm.
इट वाज वेरी इट डिक्लेयर्ड इटसेल्फ एज अ पेगन स्टेट,
Hmm.
राइट.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
उसके बाद भी ये हुआ. रोमन
Hmm.
रोमन राष्ट्र हुआ से हिंदू राष्ट्र, राइट. अब पेगन राष्ट्र जो भी कह लो इसे.
Hmm. Hmm.
लेकिन
Hmm.
वो
Hmm.
और इसीलिए तो वो सैंक्शन कर रहे थे, वो प्रोसिक्यूट कर रहे थे ना एक हिसाब से कि यार बी ए पेगन, बी दैट स्पॉन्टेनियस पर्सन, बी डोंट
Hmm.
डोंट बी स्टूपिड, डोंट बी सुपरस्टिशियस. बट फिर भी वो बचा नहीं पाए एम्पायर को. तो मियरली हिंदू राज्य हिंदू राष्ट्र अनाउंस करके इंडिया को हम लोग नहीं बचा सकते. इसके लिए वही ग्राउंड लेवल पे काम करना पड़ेगा.
Yes, we all have to contribute.
राइट, राइट.
That's the only option we have. Okay, I think we have covered everything. Okay, there is nothing else that we need to take care of. So see you tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. For Cast in Japan special episode in Hindi.
यस,
So
यस.
we are going to do a lot of Hindi episodes as well for our audience who have newly joined us. So they have little bit difficulty with English and Bengali. So we'll be doing more Hindi podcasts as well in coming
ओके,
weeks and
राइट.
months. Yes, Japan is a good counter example.
काउंटर एग्जांपल
So
ऑफ व्हाट?
uh, like a counter example as a kind of correct the caste narrative which has been built.
हाँ,
The
हाँ,
caste narrative built by the missionaries and other people, correct. So that is something which is there. So now we have to explore that this is not a specific special case for Bharat.
हम्म.
This has the like social hierarchy is something which is natural. It will be there in everywhere. So in Germany to Japan to UK.
राइट, राइट.
So to
एंड
to
मतलब इंसिडेंटली क्रिश्चियनिज्म एक्सप्लॉइट्स दिस.
exactly.
मतलब it exploits any sense of inequality that is there in a society. It is a virus. It is a virus. तो
We'll
either
take this.
ban करो.
We'll take this last comment. The shogun found out that Christianity made citizens anti-national.
राइट, राइट, राइट.
So
ये जो स्टेट की अपना जो कल्ट है वो स्टेट के ऊपर है, वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के ऊपर है. ये पहली बार ये क्रिश्चियंस ने बताया था दुनिया को कि हमारा जो बिलीफ है वो स्टेट के ऊपर है.
yeah, correct. The Abrahamic theology, the Abrahamic politics itself, correct. It has its own framework. So it
राइट.
doesn't accept or doesn't actually acknowledge any other framework
दे आर
other than its own.
कल्ट्स. हाँ, they are cults and they are subversive cults.
Okay. So thank you, Bijitda.
Thank you.
Tomorrow
Thanks a lot.
again. Yeah, tomorrow we have two
Yeah.
streams. One stream would be in Bengali on Lokhi Puja in Bengali, and one stream would be in Hindi at 7:30. And probably we'll read
Okay.
one more book as well.
Sure.
So thank you, Bijitda. Jai Shri Ram. Vande Mataram.
Jai Shri Ram, Bande Mataram. Thank you. Bye.